Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. As always, this is your host, Stuart Krantz. We have a great guest for you, as always, today. Before I introduce her, friendly reminder, y'all, this show is 100% free. It costs you nothing to be here, but we do ask that you do your part in spreading the messages, spreading the wisdom that we impart here on the show. Please share this out with at least one person that you feel like would benefit from the conversation we're going to have today. Almost no effort on your part, guys. Like, really, please do what you can. The goal here is to support people in creating the lives of their dreams. And we just ask that you take a moment or two just to share this with at least one other person. So, to dive right into today's conversation, our guest is somebody that I've had a lot of fun getting to know over the last couple of years. Our boys play sports together, specifically soccer. And more importantly, like, this is somebody that I've really come to admire and look up to, not only as a friend, but also in the community. She is, I don't know, everywhere all the time, all at once, but is also an expert on the legal side of things around bankruptcy. And we've been doing a couple episodes lately around personal finance, money. And I felt like this was a subject that probably feels a little taboo for folks, but want to make sure that we uncover it because, you know, nothing is ever the end of the world unless we decide it is. So without further ado, I want to welcome Katy Brewer to the show. Katy, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Stu. I'm glad to be here. I could talk for days about how much I love bankruptcy and my career. It truly was something that I accidentally fell into in law school. I really didn't know what I wanted to practice. And a girlfriend of mine was engaged to a bankruptcy attorney and said, I know you don't know what you want to do yet. You should go work for Rob, see what it's like. And I did, and I fell in love with it. I love the transactional nature of bankruptcy, and I love that at the end of the day, I know that my job every day is to help people, and that's really what a bankruptcy is. It's just a part of the federal court system that is meant to help people when they need it. A lot of people, like you said, they hear the word bankruptcy and they shy away, or they don't
Mm.
talk about it, which I completely understand. I respect that. But it really is a beautiful area of the law that I wish more people knew more about, instead of just the misconceptions that they might have heard online or wherever we have it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate you for being here today. And as I alluded to earlier, we've had a couple of guests on that have definitely, in their own right, been money experts focused more on like building wealth, building savings, you
yeah.
know, getting getting their children prepared for success before they even hit the workforce. But sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes things go a little bit off the track,
Yep.
off the planned path. What do you feel like people ought to know if they find themselves staring at their finances and bankruptcy actually being an option for them?
The best thing you can do is talk to an attorney, because sometimes bankruptcy might not be the best option. Our firm also does debt settlement. We do some student loan workouts if that's the case that's needed for my client. But sometimes bankruptcy isn't the right option, and we can find something that's better. And if we can find an option for our clients that is not bankruptcy, by all means, we tell them, don't do this if you don't have to. But asking the questions, just talking with somebody, that's probably the hardest thing for a client to do, to realize that we need some help. And so just picking up the phone, or logging onto our website, and reaching out to us that way, that is probably the hardest step to take. But it's an important one if you want to know what your options are. And we may sit down together and then they realize, well, we can fix this. That's fantastic. And if you don't need a
Mhm.
bankruptcy, we're not going to recommend it. But just reaching out to somebody is the best thing, the best first step to take.
So, question for you. We've hit on it already. It's almost like a four-letter word, bankruptcy, like I declared bankruptcy back in such and such a time.
Yeah.
Needless to say, there's a lot of shame around it, a lot of, very difficult feelings, a lot of guilt, I'm sure, for a lot of folks. You're here to help people.
Yeah.
What type of coaching or what type of conversations do you have with people as they're, reaching out to your law firm for this type of support to show them that this is an option and not the end of their lives necessarily?
That's a really good question because we get a lot of people who are emotional, and I really try to tell them, listen, this is nothing I know I can change your mind about right now, but by looking into a bankruptcy, you've done nothing wrong. You're just figuring out how to best take care of you, best take care of your family. And I really feel like it's the counselor at law that comes into play a lot, because I do sometimes feel like a lot of times people just want someone to talk about their concerns, their problems, because talking with a family member about something like this is not comfortable. It's not something they want to admit. So I just try, and I think I usually do, to have our clients feel like this is just something you're going to do. It's a blip in the radar. You'll look back and think that was a changing point in my life that I really needed. And by one client feeling that way, you always hope that if they talk to a friend or a family member that has to go through a bankruptcy, that they can then make that person feel the same way about it and realize that, like you said, there is life after bankruptcy. And I tell people that all the time, and I truly mean it. And we have so many different types of clients. We've had lawyers, physicians, teachers, and I tell people this, and I include myself in it, that nobody is immune to the reasons that you need to file bankruptcy. A job loss can happen to anybody. A medical issue can happen to anybody. And like you said, it's that guilt that they've done something wrong. And I really just try to counsel them that it's absolutely not. It's just something you have to do. And that's why there's this whole separate part of the federal court system that's for this specific purpose. And bankruptcy is the only area of law mentioned in the Constitution. So even folks back in the day knew that this is something people might have to do. That's what I try to do to the best of my ability with every client.
Yeah, yeah, and thankfully we're not industrial age England where you could go to a poorhouse for being
Yeah.
behind on your payments.
Yep. Thank goodness we have our own safe house for that here.
I love it. I love it. So obviously this can happen to anybody. We've said it a million times already that it's not the end of your life.
No.
Do you have any success stories? Obviously, you can't name names, but any success stories or examples of folks that you've worked with that have been in a really rough spot and maybe a couple years down the line have been able to blossom and flourish into something bigger and greater than they thought possible?
And I do. And it's just funny because I have a lot of stories like that, but I have one specific story. It was a husband and wife that came to me. They have two daughters, and it really was they needed help. They needed options. And so we ended up doing a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. We got through the process. There were no issues. And the trustee in our case, who is the party that's appointed to oversee the case, make sure it's accurate, complete, he called me one day and he said, Katie, these are your clients, correct? And he named them off. I said, yes. Is there a problem? Is something wrong? He said, no. But for the first time in my career, and he's been a trustee probably for 30 years, he said they wrote me a thank you note for helping change their lives. And he said, I've never gotten that in my career. And the same client would start emailing me every January just to update me on how life was for her and her family. And we've actually become friends now. And she tells me all the time, this changed my life. You changed our lives. And we're now friends. And she updates me on all parts of her life. And it's just really neat that something that when you realize you can have that effect on someone's life by just doing your job, what you do every day, is really cool. So that's probably like my favorite client story, because I'm still friends with her today and we send each other goofy memes back and forth. But it is really great to see her and her family, because I think that was probably 2016, 8 years later, and I still interact with her almost daily. So that's probably my coolest, most heartwarming story on my end.
I love that. And it actually touches on something I think that's universal, and it's that familiarity breeds trust.
Hmm.
And, I feel like what I'm hearing you say in this conversation is you're bringing a very human element to something, again, that can feel so big and so heavy for so many people.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that bankruptcy isn't for everybody if they find themselves in dire straits financially. What are the criteria that folks should be looking at in their
Sure.
situation for what would make sense given whatever scenario?
It's a great question. So, in terms of actually qualifying for a bankruptcy, it usually it's based on household income, household size. Um, and so depending on how many kiddos you have, what your income looks like for the past 6 months, that's going to number one tell us if, we qualify for, normally it's chapter 7 that clients are looking for, which is kind of just the complete fresh start. Um, and that's normally what people come to me. I wouldn't say most popular, but it's the most talked about kind of bankruptcy. And if that ends up not being an option, we look to a chapter 13, which is a repayment plan. It's a good way to reorganize what we have, spread it out over anywhere from 36 to 60 months, and try that method. So a lot of people that are, maybe heartbroken or sad that they can't do a 7, there still is a good option. So we've kind of got those two main bankruptcy options. But if those don't make sense, which they don't always make sense for somebody, then we can look to do debt settlement with specific creditors, things like that. Or sometimes clients want to wait, like they might be in the process of selling their home and they know that they'll have, some proceeds left over. And I always tell them, let this be your last option. I will tell them, hey, you've got options A, B, and C. Let this be D. Try to do the first options first. And I kindly tell people, I hope you don't call me back. I hope I don't have to work with you, because I really mean it. It's on your record anywhere from 7 to 10 years. So if there's a reason for it not to be on there, I always try to go with that option first. But most people do end up coming back, after they've thought about their options and choosing, either a chapter 7 or a chapter 13, because I think both give that relief that they need. And having a bankruptcy on your credit, I tell folks it's not the big, as you said, the big 4-letter word that shows up on a credit report in red. It's just something that's on there, but clients can always do a lot of other really positive things to offset having a bankruptcy on there.
What are those types of things?
Things that, you might not always think about, but clients that are paying on a car payment or a mortgage, things like that show that secured credit that's revolving and being paid. And something we always recommend clients to do either during or after a bankruptcy, whichever is their situation. Opening a credit card with a really small balance, using it every month, gas, groceries, paying it off, just building up that revolving credit again is one of the simplest things that people can do to just start that rebuilding process again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been on a debt journey myself, and I
Sure.
have learned over and over again that just having some type of credit line and paying on it consistently, even if I don't pay off the debt entirely in a month,
Yeah.
just paying down on it and never being late has made a huge difference. Even though I have a lot of money I still get to pay off. My credit is actually pretty good right now, which blew my mind to learn that actually. But I think what this is illustrating, y'all, and again, the theme here today is it's not the end of the world. Like
No.
we have so many other things going for us. It has nothing to do with who you are as a parent, who you are in your place of worship if you have one. It's not who you are in the community. It's not who you are at work. Like this is a set of circumstances that are not great,
Yeah.
but it doesn't do anything in terms of changing who you are.
Absolutely not. And it actually, it's funny you say that, Stu. I think it changes who you are in a good way, because deciding to meet with the bankruptcy attorney, go through the process, it actually makes you a lot stronger. I see some clients that come to me and they're not they think of themselves. Like they'll tell me, I feel weak that I have to do this. I feel like I'm less of a mom. And I say, no, you're actually doing the complete opposite. You're doing something, you're making a choice, a hard choice to do something better for you or your family or your kids. And I kind of see them, throughout the course, they lift their head a little bit higher. They talk a little more confidently. So they do change. It does change who they are in a really, really cool and different way. And I
Yeah.
love that transformation with clients.
So looking at this purely from a leadership perspective, I'm interpreting as what you're saying as taking full responsibility for the current situation, taking the emotion out of it and just making a choice that allows that type of breathing room.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's anything you would add to that?
I just, you said the phrase that I was going to touch on. People say, well, I feel bad because I feel like I'm walking away from something, or I'm just getting out of this and I'm not taking responsibility. And I tell them that's not the case, because you're not, you're getting out of the debt, but you're also, you're doing something that's really hard to do. So you're not, they feel bad for the creditors. And I say, I completely understand that, but creditors, they run this risk that when they extend credit, they might not get paid back. And that's just the business that they're in. So I don't want you to feel bad about that, because they do what they need to do when they extend credit. You're doing what you need to do by looking into a bankruptcy. I just always tell them they'll write it off anyways, these creditors.
Yeah. Yeah, you're a line item on their P&L at the end
Yeah,
of the day.
exactly. Yeah. But yeah, and the thing is, folks ask me, well, who can find out about this? Is this a public record? And it is, but you have to really dig to find it. If you have access to Pacer, which is the electronic court record system that we use, anybody can get that. It's a paid service. So if somebody really wanted to dig and find you on Pacer, they could. They do publish business bankruptcies in the Dispatch or wherever you happen to be. And there's a legal periodical called the Daily Reporter that only nerds like myself read. So if somebody really wanted to find your bankruptcy, they could. But I tell my clients, this is your decision. You can tell people if you want, or you can just leave it between you and I. You don't have to tell anybody about this if you don't want to. You have no reason to be ashamed, as it comes from my viewpoint, but you don't tell anybody if you don't want to. So I know people always ask because they're afraid relatives will see it or friends. And I say, well, if they're true confidants and people that you love, they're going to love you either way. They're not going to care if you had to
Hmm.
do this option to survive.
A good friend of mine put it like this with something I was going through recently, not financially, but something else. And he said something along the lines of, if you think of a metaphor of being in a boat with people,
Yeah.
if people are going to jump out of your boat because you declare bankruptcy and needed to take control of your situation, they
Hmm.
were never in your boat to begin with.
I love that. I
And
love that. And
that
it's
does extend to family.
100% true. People, in my opinion, like you said, it has nothing to do with who you are, what kind of a mom, dad, sibling, it's just something you had to do. And yeah, if you don't want to be in my boat, then get out of it. My boat, you can share it if you truly are meant to be here. I love that metaphor. I'm going to use that now.
Yeah. Since we're here on the subject, if you had to describe your boat, Katy, what would you describe it as?
Oh man, I think my boat is built on it's built on loyalty and kindness and love and acceptance. We all go through different things that at the end of the day, only we know, what we feel or why we make decisions that we make. But if you have those qualities, then you're welcome in my boat any day.
I love that. I love that. And folks, I mean, this part of the conversation obviously extends well beyond personal finance. Like, it's just
Oh yeah.
being proud of who you are and what you're creating in the world. And my son Tucker said this the other day, like being the main character in your own story. Like,
Why it's why I love Tucker.
but it's writing your own story of which you are the sole and uncontested author. And sometimes you get to make hard choices, like
Yeah.
looking into bankruptcy potentially. But what does that create for you on the other side of things? And, I'm wondering, maybe not bankruptcy, but what's an example of your own life, Katie, where maybe you made a tough choice, but it ended up being well worth it on the other side?
You know, I usually think of, and my husband, Michael, and I, as parents do, you reflect on, did you make the right choice? Am I totally messing my children up right now? So that's kind of what we usually think of. Did we punish them too harshly? Were we too easy on them when they made a mistake? And so I think we go back and forth about that a lot. Are we making the right choices for our children and helping guide them right now? Because my son is 10, my daughter's 7. So my little one, Luna, she needs a lot of guidance still. She's a wild one. But Landon, just like Tucker, I mean, they're getting older. And, the longer we let their leash out, I always wonder, is this the right thing to do? Are we letting him grow up too fast? And I think back to my childhood, what was I doing at 10? Would my parents have let me do this? And so in my own life, that's probably one of the biggest things that I personally question a lot. Am I guiding them right? Am I raising them how I want them to grow up to be good, good humans in the world? And so that's probably my biggest, am I doing this right? But it is nice to, having, I just think of a lot of the friendships I have are friends of Landon's friends' parents, like you and Jen. And, it's so nice to have that kind of that village, if you will, that everyone talks about, because it's bounce ideas off of each other. What would you guys do here? And that's a really huge part of being what I feel like is a good parent, having good friends that can help. That can help.
Yeah, no, it does take a village for sure. And I've definitely leaned on Michael, your husband, a couple of times for particularly like around not coaching like the skill of whatever sport the boys are playing, but just like the mindset around it. Cause I know he coaches Landon in hockey, and Tucker's such an avid soccer player. You know, it's funny you say all that because I also find myself always questioning myself and my decisions, and particularly as it relates to being a parent. I mean, last night I'm playing Xbox with Tucker, and he's like really excited about what's happening, and
Yeah.
he wants to stop the game and do something, but it's like 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And I was trying to say to him, like, hey, buddy, like, we need to focus on the game if you want to finish it because you need to go to bed. And it came out way harsher, way more direct than I would have intended. And Jen heard it and was like, come on, Stu, like, chill down. And, the thing I like to at least remind myself is being present to those types of things and
Yeah.
just always thinking about them lets us know that we're doing okay, because not everybody has a parent who cares that much.
I agree. And I would always rather care too much or have Landon and Luna say, God, mom, lay off. Like I can do this myself, than have someone that's like, well, where's mom? Where's dad? I'd rather be too present than not present enough.
Here's a question for you. A lot of what today's conversation has been about has been responsibility.
Mhm.
How are you teaching your children responsibility currently in this season of their
That's
lives?
a great question. We try to do it from even just the most basic. You need to pick up your toys and make sure your room is clean. Just kind of, I don't know if I'd call those maybe managerial responsibility, or I don't
Mhm.
know the right phrase for it, but just kind of basic responsible. You take care of your things, you take care of, things around you and things in the house, to the responsibility of being a good kid. We tell them, you can be great at sports or you can strive to get really good grades. We love both of those things and they're important, but you need to strive to be a kind person. And especially in today's world where, I didn't get a cell phone till I was 15. And, Landon got one last year when he turned 9. And we knew that was a huge decision, but that comes with responsibility because When you're texting somebody, you can't take a text message back if you're mean. If you say something unkind to somebody, you cannot take that back. So we teach them that what you say matters, and what kind of a friend you are, what kind of a student you are to your teacher, that all matters, because that's the one thing we really don't tolerate them being, is mean kids. And we all probably remember mean kids from our childhood. And
Yep.
I see it, because again, the kids today, man, they're so different, because they have so many different experiences that we didn't have when we were younger. That's the big thing. We teach them, you can be anything you want, but you have to be kind.
I love that so much. And it's so true because, you know, we never know what battles other people are facing at
Mm.
any given time.
Yeah.
And I think particularly for our boys who are in the fifth grade currently, they're definitely at that age where I think generally speaking, kids start to become a lot more aware of the world
Yeah.
and inequities in the world and
Yeah.
advantages and disadvantages and whether that's right or wrong. I think is another conversation, but it's very much there. And
Yeah.
I think that instilling in our kids a sense of kindness and maybe not being gentle all the time, but at least coming from a place of not assuming we know everything, I
Yes.
think can go a long way in how they interact with their peers and the world at large.
Well, and one of my favorite things, sometimes we'll be at home and I just think, man, our kids don't like us. They're mean to us, or they snap at us. And I'll sometimes talk to Michael's sister and brother-in-law who are in occupational therapy, and his sister is an occupational therapist, and Kevin is an intervention specialist in Southwestern City Schools. And we'll say to them, "Are our kids broken? Why are they so mean to us?" But like you or Jen will say, Landon is so kind, he always says yes and no. And Kevin will tell me, it's because kiddos sometimes blow up or get angry at the people they love and trust the most. So if other parents are saying your kids are well behaved and kind, but they're just little beasts to you, that's okay. That means they trust you enough to show you that they're really upset about something. So we're always kind of checking that, if parents and teachers are telling us that we have kind, polite children, that means the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think our kids feel the most comfortable around us, so they feel the most free to have the broad spectrum of emotions and reactions and feelings. And that's something I get to remind myself of personally, because Tucker will act and say things to his mom that would not have flown in my childhood, like
Oh,
in the household I grew up in. And I have to catch myself because he's just expressing himself and he
yeah,
feels safe to do that with us, where maybe he doesn't, at your house or someone else's.
yeah,
And that's not right or wrong, but he still gets to be a human being and have his feelings at the end of the day.
yeah, I agree 100%.
So, want to switch gears here a little bit. Like me, you are an avid runner. So, we were definitely going to squeeze this into the conversation at some point. So, here we are.
Yay.
I love running because it's such an allegory for life in general. And I'm super excited to have a fellow runner here so we can nerd out on it a little bit. And I just want to hear from you, Katie. Like, what are the lessons that you have learned from running as a hobby, as a sport, and what the listeners can take away from that?
A couple things for me. So I like to train on my own, which some people say, why aren't you in a running group? And I do better on my own because number one, it's therapeutic. It's a nice way to escape by myself. As much as I love being home with the kids, I mean, every parent I think will tell you, you need a break. Michael goes golfing or plays hockey because he needs a break. Running is my time to just think. I talk to myself all the time when I'm running. Um, and especially with this marathon training, which I've never run before. And so the training is very humbling. It's a way to tell myself, you can do really hard things and you're stronger than you think you are. which I think we sometimes, I mean, I do. I don't know if you ever feel this way, Stu. I think, we're our harshest critics. And
Mm,
so sometimes we don't think we can do these things that we see other people doing, other elite runners. It's like, well, I can never do what he does or what she does. But then we start to do it and it's like, well, yes, I can. Why am I doubting myself? And it's so funny because I went to one of your lovely wife's workshops she had about positive affirmations for yourself. And one of the biggest takeaways that I still say is, don't tell yourself something that you wouldn't tell somebody else to their face. So I would never tell somebody, wow, 15 miles, I don't know if you can do that. I would never say that to somebody. So why would I say that to myself? So it's just a nice way to obviously stay physically fit and to stay mentally fit, because I really think that those two go one in line with one another.
yeah. Oh, that was so good. And I agree with everything you just said. And what I would add to it is people are going to say, well, duh, but I'm always in the best shape physically and mentally when I actually have a race on the calendar. Like I've signed up, I got my money down, I am running this on such and such a date. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not just because of the training, it's not just because of the hours out there running. It's because I know if I want to run a half marathon, I need to adhere to something,
Mm-hmm.
adhere to the training regimen, adhere to the diet that will allow me to have the energy to do it. And you know what? It forces me to show up and do the work when it's not convenient for me.
Oh
And
yeah.
so because of that, I push myself way farther than I possibly would without having that end goal in mind.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you've ever experienced this, but I feel like when I get my physical being on point in that way, and it's not just like muscles and all that jazz, it's like my mental well-being, my emotional well-being. When I have that on point, other things in my life get better as well. I'm
I
wondering if you've ever experienced that.
I agree because, God, it was maybe in 2019. So I, got diagnosed with anxiety, which I know so many people have.
Mm,
Uh, but I feel like the parts of me that normally would be frazzled, worrying about things at the office, worrying about the kids, I feel like I'm a better version of myself when I'm doing something like you said, when I'm training for something. All those other areas just they kind of simmer down a little bit, or at least my normal anxious tendency to worry about them, it just feels better. I feel like I can handle things at work better, be a better attorney, be a better mom at home, not want to snap, if the kids mouth off to me, I feel like I'm less likely, to say something that's not kind to them. So I feel like the other parts of my life just kind of fall into balance when I'm physically and mentally in a really good place.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you hit on the aspect of running alone.
Mhm.
Like I'm just like you. I have no interest in running in a running group. And it's not just because I'm slow. It's because I need that alone time. A lot of days, my hour that I'm out there running is the only alone time I'll have. Even
Yeah.
if I'm listening to a podcast, sometimes the podcast just becomes white noise and I
Yeah.
can just like think or I can problem solve or whatever the case may be. And, I think that in our careers, in our homes where we are responsible for nearly everything all the time,
Hmm.
we get to unplug, we get to decompress, we get to have that almost like place or refuge for ourselves.
It is. And that's what I definitely think of running. And I was out on Saturday. Yeah, Saturday. I had my longest run ever. I had 15 miles, and it was just I thought about so many different things. Like I said, I talk to myself when I'm out there, and it's a good way to problem solve or to relax and turn your mind off. There's just the possibilities are limitless when you're out there, training. You can think about whatever you want or nothing at all. That's up to you. That's your hour or your 2 hours to do something. And it really is sacred and a great place to be.
So at risk of losing anybody who absolutely hates running at this point in the conversation, what would you say to somebody who is hearing us speak and is like, okay, this is great, but like, I hate running. What am I going to do?
I would say do anything where you get some personal time, whether that's out there walking or riding a stationary bike. The importance of getting out there and moving and doing something for yourself is huge. Whether you do yoga or lifting, just find something that you can find some solitude in. And when you get done, you think, I'm awesome that I just did that. Just any kind of physical activity, I think, is so necessary for us. There's so many different things out there that says, this will extend your life. Just find something that makes you happy, and just do that with all your heart.
Yep, 100%. And only thing I want to add for y'all, I know I've spoken about this before, but don't compare yourself to folks you see on Instagram and
Oh,
then make yourself wrong for putting yourself out there, because you don't know how many years somebody has put into something to be able to run a 6-minute mile. You
oh,
know, there's even a lot of just genetics involved, just to call it what it is. Like, no amount of training is going to get me down to a 6-minute mile, but that doesn't mean I can't enjoy running, right?
yeah.
And enjoy all the benefits. And, it so often today we're comparing our square one to somebody else's square 150.
Yeah. Well, it was
So,
interesting. So funny you say that, because I found the song I really liked maybe a month or two ago from Grey's Anatomy, because I can't get enough of it. And a line in the song said, "Comparison's a thief," and I totally believe that, because you're robbing yourself of how great you are. It's fine to look at other people and think you are amazing, but we're pretty amazing ourselves. So it's fine to build others up as well, as long as you're not putting yourself down. It's okay for us to be building, kind of, everybody builds differently. So yeah, comparison is an absolute thief that we should all just get rid of.
yep. And to piggyback off of that, just taking a step outside of your comfort zone
Hmm.
and acknowledging that for yourself is actually how we build self-confidence over time. It's not flipping a giant switch and suddenly you're a confident human being, but incrementally over time. I went and ran today. That's amazing. I never would have did that. Like, celebrate that, acknowledge it for yourself. Like,
Yeah,
that is actually how you start changing how you view yourself in the mirror.
I love that. And I agree with it 1,000%.
Katie, we are starting to run short on time here,
Oh,
and I know that we've covered a lot of ground, but where can folks connect with you off of this podcast, learn more about their options if they are struggling financially? What are the best places for them to get in contact with you directly?
absolutely. So our website is a great place to go, because it has our phone number, our contact information, and it's just woodbrewerlaw.com. And if you want to call us, you can always call me directly. My number is 614-396-7280. And obviously, Stu, if anybody asks for contact information, you just give them anything that you have.
Absolutely. And folks, as always, with all of our guests, we're going to have Katie's contact info made available in the show notes, in the descriptions, anywhere you're catching this podcast, doesn't matter what platform. Be sure to continue the conversation because, again, like, bankruptcy is not the end of your life, but it is possibly a step to get you in reclaiming control of the life that you're living.
I
So,
couldn't better myself.
Katie, final question for you. Ask every guest this. What are you acknowledging yourself for today?
That's a really good question. I'm going to acknowledge myself today. Well, kind of based on you, I'm going to acknowledge myself today, that I have a career that I love. Um, again, I could talk about bankruptcy for hours, just because I truly do. I have a great connection with my local bar. Um, I just I could talk endlessly about it. So today I'm acknowledging I'm a great bankruptcy attorney. I'm a good I'm a good mom, and I'm very lucky.
Yes, you are. Katy, I want to thank you so much for being here today. I know this was a very insightful and informative conversation for folks. And folks, for you guys, please be sure to like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon wherever you are catching this podcast so that you are sure to catch all of the updates, all the content, all the amazing guests like Katy that we have on this show. And until next week, this has been your host, Stuart Krantz, and your inside track to success.